Okay, so here we go. So what I'm going to be doing now is I do a lot of stuff on TikTok, and I get a lot of comments, and sometimes the comments I've got to be quite careful how I answer them. I do get trolled a lot by people that you know can't handle the truth sometimes. So I'm going to answer questions in bulk on here now, which is going to be different. So I've got my TikTok account on my other phone just there. I'm going to see how it goes. Okay, so I might hammer out as many as I can. I will try. I won't go too mad. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes worth of chatting, and I'll try and do it as often as I can. And I might be a little bit more honest. Now there won't be any editing, so there's going to be mistakes. I'm not going to fucking restart it again after 10 minutes of chatting. So if I end up with getting my tongue tied, there's a good reason for it because it's morning time and I've just woken up. So let's go for question number one. So this is done, or the username on this one is the way to be. The question is, studies show average prisoner IQ is 87. Do you think that affects how you have to behave inside as as a clearly intelligent person yourself? So first of all, thank you very much for considering me as clearly intelligent. My reading does not necessarily reflect that. I don't know what the average IQ of the prisoner is, but I think if we look at what the average IQ is in society, and what is it, about 110 thereabout? So let's say that the average IQ is below par, and I think it's something like below 76 is considered as, we can't really use the word, but it used to be considered as beginning with R. That sounds like farted. So let's say that it's not far off above that, is it? But then again, your IQ can jump quite significantly with just a couple of points, as in your ability to communicate. So in answer to that question is, yeah, prison's full of fuckwits. they literally struggle with it. It's not so much the level of intelligence. I think what you're finding is it's more a case of the ability to interact with people through maybe a poor upbringing or a difficult childhood. A lot of prisoners are in there for because they've come through some sort of trauma, through addiction and such like. So I don't think it's necessarily down to the IQ. I think it's more a case of the ability to engage with what's going on in front of them, and a lot of it is learned behaviour from parents and families as well. So it'd be nice to find out if that was accurate. Well, I know we did have one guy on our wing, and he wanted a low IQ because he was considered as having an excessively low IQ, it means he could have been coerced into his crime. Unfortunately, they did say he had a low IQ, but they said he was just clever enough to make it happen. So yeah, so that's the first question. Okay, so the next one is from Andrew 11998. I like this question. I've not been asked this one before. It says, Rich, I'm really interested to know, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up, and how did it form? Sorry, how did my childhood form before you joined the forces? See, clearly my fucking IQ isn't very much on reading. So I was born in 1969. I was born in the 60s. So a little sip of my man-sized coffee. I'm just really big, cut to normal size. So I was born in 69. So I grew up in Bristol, a little place called Henbury. And I grew up on a close called Vimpany Close. So if you live there, I lived in number 12. And my dad was in the police force, my mum was a hairdresser. And I grew up with around the police. I grew up in police clubs, I grew up at rugby matches, and I grew up in a place when there was no politically, PC did not exist. I remember sitting on my shed roof with my brother and our neighbours, looking across at the fields, watching the fucking skinheads and the mods fighting, and fucking rockers chase each other around, punks fucking all over the place sniffing glue. That's what I grew up. That was my childhood. So as any kid that grew up in the 70s and 80s, that's what we saw. Our form of entertainment was having stick fights. It was throwing stones at each other. That was entertainment. That was our Xbox. If you get hit by a fucking stone, you learn to move, don't you? I'm covered in scars from getting hit by stones and sticks, and that's from childhood. So the childhood part was I would class was adventurous. It was fun. It was all out playing, having dens, and that created a sense of adventure. But I think for me to form into the person I ended up with today, I think a lot of it was linked with my dad and seeing these larger than life characters in my life. People from certain jobs, I'll put it, when I was about 15, 16 years old, and I felt that this is something I really wanted to do. And I didn't ever feel like I wanted to fit into any sort of regular job. It was nothing I found interesting. When you were back in my age, the academic calendar or program was pretty fucking limited. You know, if you're a bloke, you're gonna be a tradesman, like a brickie or a fucking, you know, something on those lines. If you're a woman, you're gonna do home economics and be a mum. Be a mum, and that was it. That was how I ended up. So to be fair, my direction was pretty fucked. And when my mum and dad split up, I think I ended up going off on one. So yeah, I think I was always destined to do something different. I didn't ever plan on ending up being in prison though, selling drugs. So thanks for the question. Okay, so I've got a question here from user 47110975833092. Now, if you know who you are, thanks for the question. It is, how easy is it to get iPhones and keep hold of them? I assume you're referring to iPhones in prison. I never had one, but I know people that had tech and had smartphones in prison. And I don't think they're that easy to get hold of, but if you know the right people, you can get hold of anything you like. iPhones being part of that deal. Keeping hold of them can be difficult though, because what you've got to look at is when people get phones in, get the little fucking burners which come in, right? The tiny little ones, and they're used for dealing. As simple as that. That's what they're there for. They're for dealing, because they don't want them to be found. They're there for a reason. They're for making short phone calls to get the drops in, to get things sorted out, to get the money sorted out. That's what they're there for. When the people are getting in smartphones and iPhones, they're usually used for people who just want to have a bit of phone sex with their missus, or want to stay in touch with the world, or they might be running a business on the outside. And these are the people that try to hide them. Now, hiding those little burner phones is probably a lot easier than trying to hide a fucking smartphone. But most prison cells and the equipment that you have in your prison, your stuff that you've got, will offer somewhere to hide something. If not, you have to hide it in yourself. And then these iPhones are getting bigger and bigger. Now, I don't know, but that's a fair bit of fucking girth, one of these things. I wouldn't want to put that. That's my dad there. He's got my back. I wouldn't want to put something of that girth, let's say that's probably a good 3.5 inch girth there, in my rectum. So that's the safest place for it to be, and it's called the night safe. So a few comments. So I did a post yesterday, and someone asked a question about, have I ever seen the substance with the yellow tinge to it? And I said, yeah, I refer to it as the madman. There's a lot of comments coming back saying, yeah, that's whiz and that's fat and everything else, and I have to disagree, guys. It's not whiz, it's not fat, it's a different form of cocaine. It's just very strong and made slightly differently in a different part of South America. So just top of my coffee a second. So anyone that thinks that people bashing fucking coke with whiz or stuff like that, it doesn't happen. Why on earth would you buy something which costs more money and has a slightly different effect to it and add it to something and potentially contaminate that effect, or even contaminate the batch? You wouldn't do it. You'd use other things which are a lot cheaper. So I just want to sort of dispel that myth about people putting whiz and base with coke, because if you are doing that, don't fucking bother. It's a waste of money. This is a question from Irma. All right, mate. Not sure if you've answered this before. I have. How did the police actually start to investigate you? What started it? It's a valid question. It's a question I get a hell of a lot, in fact, more than once. It started with informants, and most conspiracy cases are fed information by informants. And this is because when you get to a certain level, the police, you become a person of interest. And people around you, if they get nicked or they get into trouble, or people that you're supplying, if they get nicked and they get into trouble and they're looking at a bit of a lump, because let's face it, if someone's buying quarter keys and fucking half keys, they're looking at a little bit of time. They're looking at probably a good few years. And that's a good threat to hang over someone. And some people's asses do go. It just happens. They think they're staunch until they realise they're not staunch. And when they realise they're not staunch, they do start to give up the goods. So for me, it was informants. Now, I've said before, I would say I am 99% sure who the informant or informants are. However, without that extra 1% to make it 100%, I would never call them out publicly. I wouldn't do that, because it's not the right thing to do. Same as people throw around the word grass like it's fucking, it's what's the phrase? Don't throw stones in. People in glass houses don't throw stones. Such like, people that use that word freely generally feel it's an accepted term, and therefore I think they're the ones more likely to turn to be a grass themselves. Excuse me. So it's definitely informants. And the reason I know that is because when you sit down, and I remember this, sat in my police interview, the first one, and they start the first bit off, they go for a little bit of spiel, and then the first thing they say is, we've received information. Oh, sorry, or we've received intelligence. We've received intelligence. Oh, fucking hell, really? That's interesting. Thank you. I'll take a mental note of that. So it all started off with informants, mate. So quick one here from Jordan Clayton. So how do veterans like yourself get treated in prison? Well, I guess the thing is, because I tend to offer anyone a bit of respect. And I'm courteous and I'm polite. And anyone, whether you're a veteran or not, if you're decent and you're decent to people, if someone is a decent person, they will treat you, they'll reciprocate that friendliness and that kindness and that those manners. If you're a complete fucking helmet and you go around like a fucking helmet, you'll be treated like one by a decent person. With it being a veteran, I think what you've got is there is from most some form of underlying respect, and it's not a case of you fought for our country. It's just a fact that maybe you should have a level of discipline which might make their life a little bit easier. So a lot of veterans are usually treated with a little bit of like, okay, let's see how you get on the wing. But if you fuck up, you fall a lot further because there's a level of expectation from veterans to be smart, clean, punctual and polite and all these sort of basic qualities that most people should have. It's expected from us. So that expectation, if you don't live up to that expectation, you fall below the original point of respect. So they think, hang on a minute, are you sure you're a veteran? You're a fucking mess and everything else. So it swings two ways, really. If you uphold those values, you'd be treated very well by the right people. If you sort of abuse those values, those people will think you've let yourself down, mate. You've fallen a long way from the tree. So it just depends on the people you're around. So I got a load of questions that I saved up, and these are going back as far as the 15th. So that's last weekend. I think it was possibly last Friday, I think it was. What I do is I look at comment, I think, oh, that's a bit tasty. I'll save that one. Stick it in me notes, and I'll fucking get back to that in a bit. So this question here is, and it was just a very simple username, is he. I think you managed to get that one quite well, mate. What do the police check on the phones? That sounds like he might be in trouble. So I would say what they're looking for is images, that they're extracting the data for your phone calls, they're checking that they're extracting the data for text messages. And people may think that if you take a photograph of something and you delete it, it's not deleted, it's still in there. It just gets overwritten. That data is still hiding there in layers underneath, or so I believe. So that's something someone needs to be aware of, is if you have a moody fucking phone and you've got a bit of a thing going on and you're taking photographs and you deleted them thinking they're not there anymore, they probably are. So when you're sat in your fucking front room counting all your fucking money with your mates and you're fucking laughing about it and say, yeah, look, it's got loads of money, and it's all bundled in hundreds and contaminated with drugs, and you're taking a photograph of your mate with it, and there's a reflection of you in the television and in the mirrors and everything else, they'll see that stuff and that'll be used as evidence against you. So they're generally picking up anything they can which could be useful to help them investigate you and find out if you're guilty. They're also looking at the names in your address book, and they're using things like that, looking at these names in the address book and say, right, okay, are these known to us? Let's take a look at all these names. They can put a lot of information from phones, especially these fucking things, smartphones. Okay, the next question is from WX Utes. What's prison like in the UK? See so much about US prisons on here. Very different. The UK prisons are just worlds apart from the US. I mean, I think the UK prisons seem to be going the way the US ones by warehousing people. But from my perspective, the UK prisons do it differently. They're a little bit torn, I think. You've got some really good people that are trying their best to approach the Scandinavian model, which is all about 100% about reform. If you look up the Scandinavian model on prison, it's so fucking different, it's unreal. You look at the US model and it's all about fucking punishment. Wear them in, lock them in. But you do have different forms of American prisons. You've got the fucking state penitentiary, then you've got the fucking city jail. There's all different kinds. I guess that's the same way saying we've got a remand prison, we've got our training prisons. So UK prisons compared to the US ones are very different animals. So I think I've answered this question before, but I'll go into it again because it's an interesting one. So the question is, and this is, I won't give you a name because just in case you're the one being watched. Could you tell me why someone who hasn't knowingly committed a crime would be surveyed? Is there a specific reason why they might watch you? Well, let's look at two things. One is you could be paranoid and you're not being surveyed. You've got something called, and depending on your mental health, if you are suffering any form of psychosis or sort of bouts of psychotic behavior, hallucinations and seeing things is a very real thing, and it's very, very real to you. So that's one thing. You could be seeing something that's not there. And once paranoia kicks in, if you're using drugs, if you're using amphetamine especially, and over smoking on the pot, you can see something which may not actually be happening. I'm not saying you're seeing something which isn't there. You could be misreading the situation. That's one thing. The other thing is you could be known to a person, or they could be surveying someone near you. They might not be actually watching you. They could be watching the house next to you or someone with you. That's always a possibility. But the reason if you could be being surveyed is if you are involved or linked with any criminal gang of any kind, there'd be an ongoing investigation and they might see you as a potential weak link. If you're not involved in anything, but you know something is going on, they might see you as a weak link, but they wouldn't throw a huge amount of resources at someone that's not involved. It would be just a drop by. And let's have a look at this guy. His name's cropped up. Let's have a look, see what he's all about, or she, in fact. So that's the reasons I can come up with. But generally speaking, you'd have to be involved with something to get surveyed. Okay, so this one is from Sebastian Tickleberry. What a fabulous name. If you had your time again, how would you run the operations differently, if at all? It's really hard to figure out what I'd do differently because I think I had a run of 15 years without a touch. So I think I did it I think from my perspective, I did it pretty well. I know I got caught, but I got caught for an informant. Now, no matter how well you run your operation, no matter how good you do something, if there's a fucking snake in the grass, they will bring you down either way. It doesn't matter how good you are. I think in hindsight, I would have been very mindful about the people that I trust, but that's also very hard to do because you don't know how well you can trust someone until the heat is on them and they're in trouble. So in essence, I don't think I'd change anything. I think I'd do it the same as I would. And it's always an accelerated path, towards the exit. And for me, that's what it was. Once I saw my exit, it was in a case of accelerating towards that exit and do what you can on that way. It was a do or die. It was like, I'm going for this now. And no matter how bad things get between me seeing an exit and me getting to the exit, I'm gunning for it. And I'm going to make as much money as I can. And in the process, if I get caught, I get caught. Unfortunately, I got caught as I actually got out the exit. They just reached out and grabbed me by the scruff of the collar and pulled me back in again. So that was a fucker, wasn't it? Okay, this one is from Ben, spelt with a 3 instead of an E. Did you join the army before or after your devious days? Just curious. Well, I was always a little bit devious. Even before I joined the army, I was getting up to no good. I used to work in a shop called Hero Martial Arts in Bristol. It was on Castle Mead. I think it's Castle Mead. It's now Cabot Circus. It's all changed now. And when I was there, I used to back in the days when you could sell knives and throwing stars and katanas and everything, nunchucks, you name it, you could sell it. But you could only sell it to someone with an MAC license. So they come in with their license and they've got their martial arts license, and you could sell it to them. Now, I used to look at these people and they come in and say, "Oh, I can't sell it to you, mate. It's a Tanto knife. I can't sell it to you. This thing's fucking brutal and savage." But what I would do is take some sort of contact details. It would be a home phone number usually, and I speak to my mate who was working in the warehouse for the martial arts shop. And every week I'd go and have a little list of names. Here we got this names here, mate. List of like a shopping list, and he would fill up a fucking box of all these things, as well as other stuff for us as well. And he'd take the box of all this stuff, and outside where the warehouse was, there was a skip, and behind the skip was a wall. Behind the wall was a riverbank with loads of bushes. Now what he'd go out to the skip with it as if it was rubbish, haul it over the fucking wall into the bushes, and we'd go and collect that after we'd all finished work with a little holder, stuffed holder full of all these fucking weapons, and we'd go and flog them. So I was flooding the streets with all sorts of shit. I was always a little bit devious. Even when I was serving, I was a bit naughty. We'd go out fucking robbing and breaking into fucking cars locally, as we found out the Germans kept money in the cars because of on-the-spot fines. We realised that they kept 100 Deutschmarks in their car, or 50 Deutschmarks, whatever it was. Was it 100 Ds? 100, I'm pretty sure it's 50 Ds to keep in the car. I used to go out after getting pissed up in the naffy bar and go out to local towns, fucking nick all sorts of stuff. So I've always had an element of wanting to get in trouble about me. I've always been devious, but all the drug stuff started really as I was coming out of the army, and certainly the dealing was about 3 or 4 months after I came out. Okay, so this is in relation to the guy that's escaped prison and got caught again and is now pleading not guilty. And the question, and this is, I can't, mate, you've got some flags and a few bits on this one. So it's rearward / 8 / Ollie. I think it's a French flag and a Jamaican flag. If you've been given a full life sentence and managed to escape like him, what would your plan be? So that's actually quite valid, because most people who haven't got a full life sentence, pointless escape and just do your fucking bird. But if you had a full life sentence, now looking at the categories, now you're probably unlikely to escape from a category A. It's highly unlikely unless you got some serious fucking means, and you've been in a category for a reason for that, to prevent that happening. Coffee's getting a bit cold, I do apologise, I'm running low. You'd have to wait until you progress down to your Cat B, still difficult, Cat C. By the time you get to a Cat C, you're nearly going, so escape is pointless. But let's say you had the means to bust out of a category A. Where would I go? Now, I'm not really up on things like jurisdictions in different countries, but you need to go somewhere where they can't extradite you. And whatever country that might be, I would be aiming for that one. Now, you'd have to have, you can't just plan the bit out of prison. That's no good. That's one part, getting out of the jail. You then have to get far enough away from the jail, out of the immediate search zone. The police will calculate how far can this man realistically travel by what means of transport within a given time. Right, he's been missing for 2 hours. How far could he have got? And they'll create a perimeter, and they'll be searching that perimeter heavily, as well as any borders. Your name would be flagged up on all the customs, everything. You name it, your name would be out there. Interpol would be informed immediately. So you'd have to have a private exit out of the country by private aircraft or on a little boat somewhere. Yeah, that's your only way out. And then I'm guessing some people said, well, head north up to Scandinavia and maybe head across to fucking Russia or something. Who'd want to live in fucking Russia? I don't know where I'd go. Anywhere where I could be safe from extradition. I guess somewhere, some Asian island somewhere. If you're going to escape, you need money. That's another thing as well. And if you got money, you need to make sure you've got that money either safe and sound and accessible, because you can't have family send it to you because they'll be watching them. So many things you need to consider. There's a huge amount of logistics involved. And I think in the end, whole life tariff, I guess it'd be worth escaping. If you got yourself cut ears on some fucking some little sexy island somewhere, enjoying the sun and the locals, and you got caught, you got put back in for the rest of your life, and at least you had a bit of a holiday, haven't you? So I think that's be somewhere decent. In fact, I'm on nearly 23 minutes already. I'll do a couple more and then I'll wrap it up. So this one is from Rosscam 17152. Do any jails in England do any jails in England? Do any of the prisoners do 4 to a cell? So I take the cock up, I have to try again. Ireland now is the norm on remands. The only prison I've been in where they've had a 4-man cell is Gloucester. When I was on remand in Gloucester in 2011, what was I on, A-wing? I was on A-wing. At the end of each wing, up on the I think it was on the 2s and the 3s, the end of the wings, they had 4-man cells. And I don't know if there's on both sides. I know on the right side where I was, the last cell was a 4-man pad. I can't think of anything worse than being in the 4-man pad. Fuck that. And I don't know what the advantage was on that one. I guess people just like maybe they're codees, maybe they're mates, I don't know. But I couldn't think of anything worse being in a 4-man pad. The other place I do know where they had a larger room was HMP Bristol, on one of the wings where the admission or the reception orderlies would be in one room together. And I think it was big, like fucking 5 or 6 man room, I think, because Vlad, my co-defendant, went in it and he moved off to that. I went to his pad on B101 on B wing. I went to a single pad and he went to a fucking 4 or 5 man pad. I thought, why would you do that? Other than that, you do get 2-man pads obviously quite regularly, but most people these days want their own pad for lots of reasons. Privacy is just a massive fucking deal. So no, 4-man cells, I think it's just disastrous. I know it's a good way to fucking warehouse people though, isn't it? Imagine that if the prison system went that way and had bottled up people like four to a pad. Right, I'm going to call it a day on this one. I've done 25 minutes, so I'm going to do more. One thing to remember is, if you do have questions, leave them on TikTok, stick them in the Q&A section. I think it's called For You section now, or leave a comment or question on here, and I'll do the thing. If you want to see more, subscribe, like, all that fucking bollocks, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, this is the first one. I will do more. It will take a bit to get momentum. And if you've got any questions at all about anything about that life, and look at my bio. It's ex-forces, close protection, surveillance, bodyguard, organised crime, prison, massive into reform, advocate for veterans in custody, author of Charlie 4 Kilo. The new book, Overseas Operations, is now being published. Pre-orders being taken on iamrichjones.co.uk. How about that? Have a good day.